start with the name of Allah, who is most beneficent and merciful. There is a reason Allah calls His words light. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and deception, the heart can easily lose sight of its direction. But Surah Al-Kahf stands as a lamp in the middle of that darkness. Every verse in it carries a quiet radiance that shields the believer from confusion, temptation, and despair. When you recite it daily, you are not merely reading a story. You are fortifying your soul against the storms of this life. The light of Surah Al-Kahf is not visible to the eyes, but to the heart that seeks refuge in Allah. It teaches you to recognize the illusions of this world, to see beyond material glitter, and to stand firm when faith is tested. Every story within Surah Al-Kahf speaks to a different trial the human soul must face. The trial of faith, the trial of wealth. In the trial of knowledge and the trial of power, all are revealed not as history, but as mirrors. You see yourself in the companions of the cave, young people who chose seclusion over surrender, who left behind comfort for the sake of conviction. You see yourself in the man with 2 gardens, surrounded by luxury, but blinded by arrogance, forgetting that every blessing is a trust. You see yourself in Moses, seeking understanding, learning patience before the unseen wisdom of Allah. You see yourself in Dhul-Qarnayn, the ruler given authority, reminded that even power must be used with humility and justice. When you read Surah Al-Kahf daily, you are not memorizing ancient tales. You are training your soul for the daily trials that still echo from them. You are telling your heart that faith is not static. It is a living struggle between surrender and self-deception. The surah reminds you that material wealth can vanish, that human knowledge has limits, that strength fades, and that the only true refuge is Allah. Every time you recite its verses, you wash away the dust that the world throws upon your spirit. You are reminded that the cave was not just a hiding place. It was a sanctuary, and every heart that turns back to Allah becomes a cave in itself, where the noise of the world cannot reach. And there is also a deeper rhythm in this surah, a spiritual frequency that aligns the heart back to truth. When the Prophet told us that reciting it on Fridays would protect us from the trials of the Dajjal, it was not only about the end times, it was about the mindset that resists falsehood in any age. The Dajjal represents deception, the glamour of lies, the confusion of truth and falsehood. Surah Al-Kahf is the antidote. It awakens the believer's insight so that even when the world glamorizes what Allah forbids, your heart recognizes the illusion and turns away. And perhaps that is why it should not be limited to Fridays. The soul hungers for light every day. To recite it daily is to keep your heart anchored. Each verse becomes a reminder that your purpose is higher than the fleeting applause of this world. When life feels uncertain, when guidance seems far, when your heart trembles between right and wrong, this surah whispers back, hold on to Allah, for His mercy always finds those who remember Him. The cave becomes not a place of fear, but of safety. The stories become not legends, but living lessons. The daily recitation becomes not a ritual, but an act of protection, a dialogue between your heart and your Creator. In this way, Surah Al-Kahf becomes your daily sunrise. Its words pour light into the hidden corners of your spirit, chasing away the shadows of doubt and weariness. And as the light grows, so does your clarity, your faith, and your ability to see beyond the illusions that once held you captive. To read it every day is to declare to the world that your heart belongs not to its fleeting promises, but to the one who never changes, never forgets, and never abandons. The story of the young men who took refuge in the cave is not simply a tale of history. It is the living heartbeat of faith under fire. It begins with youth who stood against the tide of disbelief, who refused to bow to the idols of their time. They were not prophets, not kings, not scholars, just ordinary believers who made an extraordinary choice to protect their faith, even if it meant losing everything else. They left behind families, wealth, and comfort, walking into uncertainty with nothing but their trust in Allah. And it was in that surrender that they found true security. The cave they entered was not grand. It had no light, no warmth, but it became a palace of divine protection because they carried faith inside it. Every believer at some point must walk into a cave. It may not be made of stone, but it feels just as lonely. It could be a moment when you are misunderstood, isolated for your beliefs, or when holding on to truth feels too heavy. The cave is that place where the world can no longer hear you, where you stand with trembling hands and whisper, "My Lord, guide me." And that is where the story begins to unfold, not with power, but with surrender. Allah causes sleep to overtake them, a sleep that becomes their shield. The world forgets them, but heaven remembers. The kings and rulers of their time vanish into dust, yet the sleepers of the cave are remembered in the eternal word of God. There is a profound lesson here about divine timing. Sometimes Allah protects you not by changing your circumstances, but by hiding you within them. He shields you in silence so that He can prepare you for something greater. The cave becomes not a symbol of fear, but of faith's preservation. While the world outside continues its chaos, the believer rests under Allah's mercy. The silence of the cave teaches patience, the kind of patience that trusts even when the reason is unseen. Every verse in this story calls us to question what kind of cave we would choose. When the world tempts us to follow comfort, to blend with the crowd, to compromise truth for acceptance, would we have the courage to step away? Faith will always require a separation from what distracts, from what deceives. It is never easy to leave the familiar, but Surah Al-Kahf reminds us that separation for the sake of Allah is never loss. It is the soul's migration toward its true home. The young men's words echo through time, "Our Lord, grant us mercy from yourself and prepare for us right guidance in our affair." It is a prayer that defines the believer's journey. They didn't ask for the cave to open, for the trial to end, or for the world to change. They asked for mercy and guidance, because when you have those, you have everything. And Allah answered in a way far beyond their imagination. He didn't only preserve them physically, He preserved their legacy, their faith, their message. When you recite this story daily, it is as though Allah is whispering to your heart, "If you protect your faith, I will protect you. If you trust me enough to step into the cave, I will send peace into the darkness." The cave becomes a metaphor for every hidden place where Allah's mercy resides. It is where fear turns into serenity, where loss becomes transformation. It is where you realize that solitude with Allah is far sweeter than acceptance by the world. So when life drives you into your own caves, moments of rejection, trials, silence, or isolation, remember the sleepers. Remember that Allah's care does not depend on visibility. Sometimes the most unseen seasons of your life are the most protected ones. Every time you read this story, it builds a quiet courage within you. The kind that does not seek recognition, but righteousness. It reminds you that faith is not about being seen by people, but about being remembered by heaven. It is the strength to believe that even in silence, Allah is speaking, even in stillness, He is working, and even in darkness, His light is near. Surah Al-Kahf presents a powerful lesson about the fragility of wealth and the danger of attachment to worldly possessions. The story of the man with 2 gardens is not merely a cautionary tale about arrogance. It is a mirror held up to every heart that mistakes abundance for security. He was blessed beyond measure, surrounded by lush gardens, flowing rivers, and fruits that promised comfort and prestige. Yet his heart became entangled in pride, imagining that his wealth was permanent, his success earned by his own hands, his security independent of Allah. He forgot that all blessings are temporary and entrusted, not owned. Daily life tempts us to fall into the same illusion. We work tirelessly to acquire comfort, status, and material abundance, forgetting that these things are fleeting. We measure our worth by what we possess, our happiness by what we accumulate, and our security by what we can hold on to. The surah reminds us that wealth can vanish in the blink of an eye, and what we think sustains us can become a source of ruin if it leads to arrogance and ingratitude. Even the gardens, which were a symbol of his pride, became a test rather than a blessing. What makes this story so timeless is that it reflects a universal truth. The heart often mistakes the ephemeral for the eternal. The man did not initially intend to reject Allah. He simply allowed his blessings to cloud his vision. And this is where the surah speaks directly to us. It warns against letting our possessions shape our identity or dictate our sense of worth. True security is never found in riches, but in trust in Allah. The greatest wealth is a heart that remains grateful, humble, and aware of its dependence on the Creator. Reading Surah Al-Kahf every day reminds us that wealth is a trust, not a trophy. It teaches us mindfulness over indulgence, humility over pride, and detachment over obsession. Each verse about the man's gardens becomes a mirror for self-reflection. Are we stewarding what we have with gratitude? Are we remembering that our time, health, and resources are fleeting? Are we seeking permanence in things that will inevitably fade? The surah's guidance is gentle yet profound. It encourages a heart-centered life, one that treasures the eternal over the temporary, and the spiritual over the material. Moreover, the surah emphasizes the role of foresight and gratitude. The man's downfall was not the presence of wealth, but his failure to acknowledge its source and to act responsibly. Daily reflection on this surah helps the believer recalibrate priorities, anchoring their hope not in the gardens of this world, but in the enduring rewards of the hereafter. It cultivates a consciousness that allows one to enjoy life's blessings without being enslaved by them, to act generously while remaining humble, and to plan prudently while relying ultimately on Allah's wisdom. In this way, Surah Al-Kahf becomes a daily guide against materialism, a spiritual compass, reminding us that life's treasures are temporary, but faith and gratitude endure. It is a call to live consciously, to guard the heart from arrogance, and to seek permanence not in what can decay, but in what is eternal. Wealth is a test, but when approached with humility and mindfulness, it becomes a means to purify the heart rather than a trap that blinds it. Through daily recitation, the believer internalizes this lesson, allowing it to shape decisions, intentions, and interactions with the world. It is not a mere story to be read. It is a living framework for understanding the delicate balance between provision and pride, between blessing and responsibility, and between the fleeting nature of this world and the everlasting promise of the next. Surah Al-Kahf also carries a profound lesson about the pursuit of knowledge and the necessity of humility. The story of Moses and his journey to meet Khidr is a timeless reminder that human understanding is limited and true knowledge belongs to Allah alone. Musa, a prophet chosen by Allah, already possessed great wisdom and leadership, yet he was reminded that there are truths beyond his comprehension. He sought to learn, to understand the hidden workings of divine decree, and in doing so, he demonstrated that the pursuit of knowledge requires patience, openness, and humility. The surah teaches that knowledge is not merely accumulation of facts or skills. It is understanding the balance between what is seen and what is hidden, between cause and divine wisdom. In Musa's journey illustrates that even those closest to Allah must recognize the limits of their perception. The events that unfolded with Khidr, the breaking of the boat, the striking of the boy, the wall of the town, were at first incomprehensible to Musa. He questioned, he objected, he wrestled with confusion. But each moment was designed to reveal a deeper wisdom that Allah's plan operates beyond human logic, and that patience and trust are integral to true understanding. This story resonates with every believer navigating life's uncertainties. Daily life challenges our assumptions, confronts our expectations, and sometimes appears unfair or confusing. We see injustices, losses, and events that challenge our reasoning. Surah Al-Kahf teaches that what may appear as misfortune could carry hidden blessings. What seems unfair may protect from harm, and what seems like a setback could be part of a greater plan. To read it daily is to cultivate a mindset of humility and acknowledgement that our understanding is limited, yet Allah's wisdom encompasses all. Furthermore, the surah emphasizes the spiritual responsibility that accompanies knowledge. Knowledge is not merely for personal gain or pride. It is a means to recognize Allah's greatness, guide others with compassion, and align one's life with divine principles. In Musa's humility in learning from Khidr shows that the pursuit of understanding is inseparable from submission. In every verse encourages the believer to reflect on the unseen workings of the world, to recognize that wisdom often requires patience and that guidance is granted to those who seek it sincerely. Reading Surah Al-Kahf daily nurtures this balance within the heart. It reminds the believer to pursue knowledge without arrogance, to question without defiance, and to seek understanding without forgetting reliance on Allah. It is a spiritual training that tempers intellect with humility, curiosity with faith, and learning with submission. Each recitation reinforces the lesson that knowledge is a sacred trust, not a tool for pride, and that the ultimate purpose of seeking understanding is to draw closer to the Creator and to navigate life with insight and grace. In essence, the story of Musa and Khidr becomes a living guide. It teaches that humility is the gateway to wisdom, that patience unveils understanding, and that trust in Allah transforms confusion into clarity. Daily engagement with this surah cultivates a heart that recognizes limits, values guidance, and embraces the subtle, often hidden lessons embedded in every trial and circumstance of life. It instills a consciousness that knowledge is never complete without surrender, and that the most profound understanding comes not from what we see, but from what Allah reveals in His perfect wisdom. Surah Al-Kahf teaches a profound lesson about the nature of power and authority through the story of Dhul-Qarnayn, a figure granted vast influence and control over lands and peoples. His journey illustrates that power is not a reward for pride or personal ambition. It is a trust, a responsibility, and ultimately, a test from Allah. He was given the means to impact communities, to build, to protect, and to govern. Yet with this power came the obligation to act justly, to uphold truth, and to serve the welfare of others. The surah reminds us that authority is measured not by dominion over people or wealth, but by how one exercises restraint, fairness, and humility. Dhul-Qarnayn's actions reflect the principle that true strength lies in obedience to Allah and in service to humanity. He used his authority to defend the weak, to prevent harm, and to establish justice, never for personal gain or glorification. This story challenges every believer to reconsider how they perceive power. In everyday life, power may take the form of influence over colleagues, responsibility in a household, leadership in a community, or even control over one's own choices. The lesson remains: power without accountability, humility, or ethical guidance is dangerous. Power aligned with faith and integrity becomes a means of blessing both for the individual and for society. Reading Surah Al-Kahf daily reminds the believer that worldly authority is temporary and its tests are ongoing. It teaches that those entrusted with power must remain vigilant, lest pride, injustice, or negligence obscure their hearts. Dhul-Qarnayn's example demonstrates that using power wisely requires discernment, foresight, and a continual reliance on Allah. The surah underscores that every decision, every act of leadership, and every display of influence carries moral weight, and that success is measured not by accolades, but by adherence to divine guidance. Moreover, the surah challenges the illusion that power is inherently desirable. It shows that true contentment and peace do not come from domination or control, but from righteous action and submission to Allah. The story encourages the believer to recognize that the real test is not gaining authority, but using it correctly, without arrogance, without exploitation, and without forgetting the one who granted it. Daily reflection on this narrative strengthens the heart against temptation, reminding it that worldly power is fleeting, yet integrity and justice are eternal. By reciting Surah Al-Kahf every day, the believer internalizes these lessons, cultivating humility in leadership, responsibility in influence, and mindfulness in every sphere of life where authority manifests. It teaches that true greatness is measured by service, not self-interest, and that the heart aligned with divine principles remains steadfast even amidst trials of power. The story of Dhul-Qarnayn becomes more than history. It becomes a mirror reflecting the choices, responsibilities, and tests that accompany every form of influence. It is a daily reminder that power is a sacred trust, and its greatest reward is not the acclaim it brings, but the opportunity to act justly with wisdom and fear of Allah in a world that constantly tests the heart. Surah Al-Kahf serves as a spiritual armor, a protective shield against the trials of deception, falsehood, and moral confusion that surround the believer. The Prophet taught that reciting this surah on Fridays safeguards against the fitna of the Dajjal, the great deceiver. But the wisdom of this protection extends far beyond that literal end time scenario. It applies to every era, every test, and every subtle distortion of truth that seeks to mislead the heart. In a world filled with distractions, manipulations, and illusions, the surah becomes a guide that illuminates the mind, clarifies intentions, and strengthens discernment. Every story, every verse, every lesson in Surah Al-Kahf works together to fortify the believer. The sleepers of the cave teach patience and reliance on Allah. The tale of the man with 2 gardens warns against pride and attachment to fleeting wealth. Musa's journey with Khidr underscores the limits of human knowledge and the importance of humility. Dhul-Qarnayn exemplifies just leadership and responsibility. Taken together, these narratives form a comprehensive shield. They teach the believer to recognize the false allure of worldly deception and to anchor their heart in divine truth. Daily recitation nurtures vigilance in the heart. It trains the soul to question what is transient, to discern the real from the counterfeit, and to resist the temptations that lead away from righteousness. The surah's light acts as a spiritual compass, pointing toward integrity, patience, humility, and faith. Just as a physical shield deflects arrows, this surah protects the heart from the subtle arrows of doubt, pride, and worldly distraction. The believer is reminded that guidance is not automatic, but a continuous effort of reflection, prayer, and awareness, all nurtured by turning regularly to Allah's words. Moreover, this surah cultivates inner peace amidst chaos. When the world presents confusion and trials, the believer who engages with its verses daily experiences a quiet confidence, a sense that even in uncertainty, Allah's wisdom prevails. It reminds the soul that true clarity comes from alignment with divine guidance, not from following the crowd or succumbing to superficial allure. The stories act as mirrors in revealing where the heart may be vulnerable to deception and how to strengthen it through reflection and mindfulness. Reciting Surah Al-Kahf daily also builds resilience. The trials of life, be they injustice, loss, moral challenges, or societal pressures, become opportunities for growth rather than sources of despair. The surah reminds the believer that darkness, whether external or internal, is never permanent when one holds on to Allah's light. It encourages steadfastness, cultivates wisdom, and reinforces the importance of vigilance, humility, and sincere faith. In this way, the surah functions as a daily shield protecting both mind and heart. It equips the believer to navigate a world filled with spiritual and moral deception, to resist the seductive allure of fleeting pleasures, and to remain anchored in what is eternal. It strengthens the soul against doubt, distraction, and despair, ensuring that even when the world grows dark, the light of guidance within the heart remains unwavering.